Okay, well, welcome everybody. Hopefully you got the right place. This is the first of this year's 4 virtual summits like we did last year. And we're going to talk about the Genesee River. You saw the information before there through the slides about the next, we'll talk about the next one that's coming up next week later on. We have today a speaker from Causewave Community Partners, Tiffany Cirincione, Cirincione. He's going to make a presentation about some work that they've done for many years, the H2O Hero program. And I think Paul Swako's on the line too.
Yep,
so that'll help.
I'm here.
Yep, good. Thanks, Paul. To talk about a survey they've been doing for some time, and I'll let Tiffany introduce all that. So she's agreed that if you have a question while she's making the presentation, she's willing to answer them as long as we can keep things going. We have plenty of time, but just want to make sure we can get to the end. So I guess without further ado, Tiffany, Mike, you want to?
I'm going to stop sharing mine and leave it up to you, Tiff.
Awesome.
There you go.
Thank you. I'm just gonna build in, I'm just gonna share my screen here. Hang on one quick second. Okay, I think we're good to go. Okay. Can you guys see that yet?
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
There you go. Coming there.
Okay. We're cooking with gas now?
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for having me. It's been a while since I've had to be up and fully functional by 8:30. So I appreciate that very much. Working from home has sort of spoiled me. So I'm glad to be here with you all. And when we got the request for a presentation, we're delighted to share these survey results with you all. And happy to know that you're interested in how this turned out. So I have a lot of data here that we're going to go through today. As George said, I'm happy to make this conversational. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them while we're going through the information, and I'll do my very best to answer them. Paul was kind enough to be one of our volunteers in the survey committee for the H2O Hero program. So Paul, feel free to jump in if there's anything that I've missed. It's nice to have you here to lend your experience and opinion to this as well. So
Will do.
great. So just a little bit about the survey. We conducted this survey this year. The previous one was completed in 2018 before my tenure with Causewave started. And the survey ran from October 27th to November 17th last year. And it was conducted in partnership with Causewave and BRX Research, who we've used in the past to assist with these. And what Eric does over there at BRX is help us. He helped really design some of the parts of the survey that were a little more advanced for us. He's designed the whole thing in the past. So we took on a little bit of that responsibility because we have a new survey software, and he kind of shepherded us through the pieces that we were less familiar with. But also Eric helps. Eric is the BRX research folks are who we purchased the panel through. So they're the ones who help us garner responses to the survey in general. We're going to go over in the slide deck today some points in an executive summary, some demographics, and then some results of the survey. So our executive summary has some really important key pieces to the survey, and we've broken them down into 3 specific areas: awareness of advertising in H2O Hero generally, plastic pollution, and understanding of watershed and stormwater runoff. In terms of awareness, 25% of respondents recall having seen or heard public information about water quality in the last 6 months. That was up by 7% from 2018. 65% recognize the H2O Hero logo, which is up 20% from 2018. To us, that is a significant jump. And it does give us a little inkling that our marketing is working potentially. And then 51% who recognized the logo said they saw it on TV, which is an increase of almost 30% from 2018. And frankly, it is the data point that makes me chuckle in this whole presentation, because we haven't done TV advertising in several years. So I don't know if they're what I personally think, and this is speculation on my part, is that they're doing what a lot of us do, where they're watching TV but on their phones. And so they're seeing the paid advertising on their Facebook or social media outlets while they're watching TV. So it could have gotten confused that way. But respondents also saw the water droplet image, which we'll talk about later on, in a variety of places, including, again, TV, social media, websites, the zoo, and other places too. So in terms of plastic pollution, this is a key piece of this survey because we work very closely with Christy Tyler, I'm sure you know, from RIT. She's currently working on a plastics pollution grant. And we're, obviously the plastics pollution issue in our area continues to be of concern. So we had about 80% of respondents viewing litter on the beach, people dumping trash in local waterways, and industrial waste and pollution as important sources of plastic pollution to the lake. 86% support bans on plastic products that they identify as harmful. And 89% are somewhat concerned or very concerned about human health impacts of microplastic in Lake Ontario. The majority of the respondents to this survey already do or are willing to try various things to help solve the problem of plastic pollution. And then in terms of understanding of the watershed and stormwater runoff, 39% of respondents knew the definition of watershed, which actually was a decrease from 2018 and 2015 surveys. And 61% of respondents knew the definition of stormwater, which also decreased. So we can see just from the very onset that we have some wins in our marketing categories and some ground to gain in our education in general. The other pieces that we've analyzed in an executive summary here are the behavior and attitude and how they've changed over time, and the effect of water quality. Important things to note in the attitude changes over time is that county respondents that do not use fertilizer or pesticides in their lawn went from 49% in our previous survey to 58%. So that number we're considering a good thing, obviously. The percent of respondents that follow the instructions on a package when fertilizing or hiring a lawn service also decreased. And the percentage of people who used some other method, quote unquote, to make decisions about fertilizer increased by 20%. So I think most of you know that some of that has to do with general application, and some of that has to do with the changing laws around fertilizer as well. So we'll use that to our advantage. The percentage of people who have a rain barrel is up from 4% to 9%, still low, still some things we can do in that area, but a good increase. And then a majority of survey respondents report seeing no improvement in the water quality of either the lake or the Genesee River, which I don't know if that's accurate, but that's the perception, right? 66% of respondents would be supportive of a nominal fee to fund water quality improvements in the area, which is roughly the same as 2018. And then the effect of water quality, the percentage of respondents who were affected by things including beach closures, odor near waterways, taste in drinking water, etc., has increased since 2018. So any questions before we move into the demographic?
Yeah, Tiffany, just one point out, you missed the bullet on the household hazardous waste, which is about the going to the disposal facility. The use is dropped from 51% to 38, 39.
Thank you, Paul.
That's unfortunate.
Yep, thank you.
That's one of the questions that led me to wonder whether there were differences in the profiles of the current group of respondents versus the earlier ones.
So we're going to talk about that next, actually, in demographics. So thanks for the transition, Mike.
You're welcome. I'll take my check later.
Excuse me. So in our survey this past year, all 570 people who took it were from Monroe County. 30% of them were City of Rochester residents specifically. The age range is relatively evenly spread out between the 18 to 74-year-olds. 57% were female, which is similar to our 2018 survey. 68% were white, 19% were Black, and the rest were other races and ethnicities. 50% of respondents had an income between $20,000 and $75,000 a year, and the level of education was relatively mixed. So we'll get into the specifics of that. So you can see it's a pretty fair breakdown, between the different age groups here. And that definitely changes with the where do you live question. Obviously the most being City of Rochester, and then respondents go down from there, Greece, Arundecoit, Gates, etc. The other towns that folks filled in is this, when you put other and then a category for folks to respond to, you kind of never know what you're going to get. So we like to put a little bit of that in the slide deck as well. So Rochester was, 5 people said Rochester itself. What that means to them might be different than what the city is. I don't know. But we had some folks from West Henrietta, some folks from Honeoye Falls, a person from Alice Street. So that's very helpful, I guess. So, and then gender that they identify with. This question is changed over time, obviously. So we do specifically try to make sure that we have a category to fit everyone's preference here. The male to female ratio is about on par with other national surveys and surveys that we do. There's frankly always more women who take a survey. And then we have a couple percentages of folks who either identified as non-binary or preferred not to answer. And then folks with children under the age of 18 in their household, the vast majority here was no. And then we're talking next about how much formal education do people have? So interestingly enough, this is not a bad spread technically. You can see that, between high school, some college, and a bachelor's degree, it's the majority of respondents fall into one of those categories. And then what describes your race or ethnicity? Majority of folks who answered this identify as white or Caucasian. This is something we're always looking to try and do better with in terms of getting diversity, racial diversity in respondents. And then household income breakdown. And currently own or rent. So in the previous survey, we were able to do, we chose to focus on people who own their apartment or own their dwelling. So there was an emphasis on home ownership. I guess the feeling is, and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, the feeling is if they own it, they have more discretion over what they're putting on their lawns, etc. We did not have that requirement or preference put into this survey because there are still a lot of questions that apply to folks who are renters or who live with parents and other situations. So this is a little more even than in past surveys. And so, Mike, to your question, there isn't a lot of comparative data between 18 and 21 surveys. in the demographic information. I can get that for you. We can send it to you to see how it does compare. But our next section talks a little bit more about specific results and questions. So
It would be interesting to know because it begs the question, for example, on the disposal question that Paul highlighted, whether people were using it and then just stopped, or whether you got a different slice of the public.
yeah, we can take a look at previous survey results. And Paul, if you have time, because I know you have access to all of those, if you're willing to pull it up while I go through some of the results, that would be okay too.
Oh, I don't have those things at my fingertips. I'd have to
Oh.
dig them out. So
Okay, no worries.
don't expect it today. But I think that's true, Mike. And I believe the guy from the BRX had said that the home ownership was probably the only issue I think that may have skewed results. Do you recall that, Tiffany?
Skewed it how?
Well, no, I mean, the fact that, they're not comparable to other, it's the biggest difference that we've seen from other previous surveys. I mean, the other things like the age distribution and, where they're living and all that kind of stuff. I mean, locality and all is not a problem. I think the biggest issue was the home ownership versus renter. But
Yeah.
that's my memory. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick cursory glance at.
So you have them at your fingertips. I'm impressed.
So the previous survey in 2018, like we said, the emphasis was on owning. So that is a difference, with 70% owning versus renting. Age ranges were not too different. I was happy to see that some of these, like 35 to 54, does seem bigger in the 2021 survey, a larger percentage of the population. Yeah, and then we get into our other result areas, which there is some comparison of in the next slide. So I'll go back to that. So in terms of rating the water quality of Lake Ontario, you can see previous surveys here. So we've actually even included 2012 and 2015 surveys in the lighter blues, and then the red is 2021. So, in talking with Christy, who's a scientist and a researcher, about some of this data, whether or not it's significant, I'm not really sure, but we do tend to follow the trend lines so that we kind of understand where we might place emphasis in the future. The percentage of respondents that viewed the water quality of Lake Ontario as very good or acceptable has basically stayed about the same from 2018 to 2021. And the percentage that rate it poor has decreased, and that has been the trend for the past 3 years. The percentage of people who rate the quality as very poor or that don't know have increased in each year, which does go against the downward trend we saw in the previous 3 years. So for our purposes, we kind of, the very poor and the don't know, we definitely pay attention to those to make sure that, when we think about our marketing decisions, we're taking that information into account. Can you guys see this okay? Is it big enough? Because I know sometimes it's difficult to look at these screens.
Why would you say that the percent that is very good has stayed the same? It looks like it's dramatically decreased.
Well, that's sort of the researcher and Christy, and also some of us pointing out that 9% to 12% isn't that big of a swing with 570 people responding.
43 to 22% is very dramatic.
Yep, that is a larger one, but again, it's sort of the trend that we're looking at here.
It looks like it's down.
Say that again.
Well, it just looks like it's sharply down. I mean, it's the same in 21 and 18, but it's what? I guess I'm reading it the opposite direction. It's sharply up
Right.
between 2012 and 2021. It stayed about the same from 18 to 21. I guess that's what your statement says. I'm sorry. I was misreading your statement.
No worries. It's early. Yeah, I mean, we're, this number, if it in 3 years, if this number continues to decline, we want to pay attention to that for sure. But again, it is perception. So
Yeah, I was looking more at the change from 2012 to 2021, which
yeah.
was not what you were stating. So
Yeah, I mean, we would like to see this acceptable rate and the very good rate continue to increase, obviously. Whether this is, again, how people perceive it versus what it actually is. So I think in all cases, well, and you all know better than I do, but from what I'm understanding in conversations with the H2O Hero folks, there is, the waterways are in better shape than they were in 2012. So that's a good thing.
Mhm.
Whether or not people understand that or experience it is a whole different subject. So we've asked folks, since they live in the area, how do you think that the lake water quality has been? This is, again, one of those perception questions, but 35% of the respondents last year did say that the water quality has stayed the same. Well, 25% said that it improved, and 28% thought it got worse, and 11% didn't know. So there is some, these are pretty solid populations of people, with 35%, 25%, and 28% having, very different responses. But they're not too far off the mark in terms of previous year responses to the same question. I don't know about you guys, and feel free to jump in, but to me, this is just dependent on how people experience the lake. And maybe what their internal expectations are of it. So in all of these cases, there isn't a really big change in percentage points from the 2018 survey.
I have a question for you, and that I wonder if people distinguish between Lake Ontario, nearshore and offshore, because the Rochester embayment behaves differently than the rest of the lake in some ways, and that confuses this question a little bit. If you happen to be a person that gets out on the lake, you see different things as you come inshore.
Yes. Yep, that's a very good point, Joseph. Thank you.
If I could jump in, I think a lot of people, maybe their easiest way to get an impression of Lake Ontario is the beach at Charlotte, at Ontario Beach Park. And I've been there the day before that algae vacuum is there, and it's just horrible, and then the day after it's just great. And I wonder if the moment that they experienced it was a lot of their impression. Or whether some respondents might see it regularly and some might only see the lake a few times a year.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
you could have a lot of these people that never even seen the lake, I mean, they never even get up there. So it's perception.
Similarly, I would think that the number of beach closings that are published, whether you actually couldn't go to the beach or whether you just heard about it, in any given year should be able to affect that dramatically. If you had a hot summer and there were a lot of beach closings, you'd think it was getting worse.
Yep.
Do you ask people how often they visit the beach or the lake?
I'm not sure if we ask them frequency of visitation, but I do know that we ask them what they do in the waterways in our area. And we will talk about that going forward too.
Okay.
it's been a few months since I presented this, so forgive me. I'm less intimately familiar as I was 4 months ago with this data. So yeah, the interesting thing is that, again, while we're measuring perception, which is sort of a difficult thing to do, the data year over year, you know, with the same question isn't dramatically different. So, you know, there's percentages of population that I think believe that it's gotten better or gotten worse. And that could be determined by, you know, their overall perception of things. I don't know, but nothing dramatic of note. And then the same question for the river, how would you rate the water quality in the river today? You know, the percentage of folks who said the water quality is very good or acceptable has followed the trend line of the past 3 years. And the percentage who said that it's poor or they don't know has decreased, which is a good thing. And then there was actually a jump in those who rate the water as very poor, going from 16% to 21% from our 2018 survey to last year's, which is actually close to the previous percentages as well. So, you know, again, while this 5 points percentage wise, it's a little more significant than some others we've talked about, but, you know, it was interesting that this one did kind of buck the trend from previous years. And then same question from the lake. So since living in the area, do you think that the river water quality has changed? With 36% of the people in 2021 saying that it stayed the same, while 17% thought it improved. 33% said it has gotten worse, and 14% don't know. I think the interesting thing to me is that this don't know category, excuse me, has gotten slightly more informed, or they have at least an opinion they're willing to wager over the past several years. So, you know, when we think about what we're using this data for, honestly, we've had several discussions about doing some further analytics on it. You know, but what it means that these numbers are sort of the same, you know, in the past 9 years and 4 surveys. You know, how we're using the information is, you know, hasn't also drastically changed. So it's interesting to me, at least, that, you know, that there's not too much variance about perception of the waterways. And then we've asked, aside from the Lake Ontario or the Genesee River, what's the closest body of water to their home? This is always an interesting question because people don't necessarily know the answer, but in our case, 39% identified that as a creek or a stream. The second largest category of respondents don't know. So that's fair to say. Some think it's a natural pond, some think it's a man-made pond or stormwater, and a few do know that it's wetland. So that's some interesting data. And then we do ask, thank you, for the frequency of engaging in the following activities. The all year is the darkest of the red colors. The seasonally is the sort of in between color. And then the lighter one is never. So, you know, we did talk a lot about these categories too this year. Paul, I don't know if you remember that conversation, but you know, it was pretty in depth in terms of what folks are doing near the waterway, so that we can try and encapsulate how all the ways the waterways are used. You know, so folks definitely attend special events seasonally, as we probably could have guessed. Folks seeking solitude near the water is happening never more than it's happening all year. Exercising a dog is happening never for a lot of respondents because they probably don't have dogs. You know, cycling, picnicking, jogging, walking, or hiking, lots more is happening seasonally. Wildlife viewing, is happening. Some folks really aren't doing it at all. Ice fishing, regular fishing. I guess I'm a little surprised by that, but who knows? I don't know. If people just don't, I guess I don't fish near the waters. I don't fish at all. So I would probably be in the never category. But it always seems like there are people fishing. So I was a little surprised by that. Beach going, obviously more popular in the seasonal category. Same with swimming. And then, kayaking or boating, sailing and jet skiing, paddle boarding.
So
Those-
Tiffany, we got an answer. It says 570. So people checked off whatever boxes they participated in, if I recall. And we don't know though how many of the respondents are participating here versus those who don't. Is that correct?
So the question allows them to answer. It's a multi-level question. So
Right.
they can answer, any of those three responses. They do it all year, they seasonally do it, or they never do it for each of these questions.
Right.
So it's sort of a multiple choice.
Okay.
So like someone like me would definitely have fallen into the attends a special event seasonally and the seeking solitude never near the water. But I would have answered, each of these areas. I would have picked which one applied to me, which response. Does that help?
Yeah. But still, you don't know how many of the people, how many participants of the survey responded to any of them. I mean, or maybe the other way around. How many didn't respond to any? Said nothing. Do we have that?
So all 570 respondents did answer this question.
Okay.
But it would be interesting for you to summarize it and say how many people never attended any event and how many only seasonally, and how, so you kind of, because it could be the same people that are participating in every activity, or it could be all different people. It'd be interesting to find out how many, if you said did something on here, how many did it all year, how many did it seasonally, and how many never did any of these.
Yeah. I mean, we could take a deeper dive into the data to find out like how many never did any of these. Because within, attending a special event, I'm trying to do fast math, which is never a good idea for me, but what is 15, 53, and 32? 85. So that's
all those are going to be 100.
Right. Or at least very close. So yeah, I mean, we could total up the number of people who never do anything and get an accurate description of folks who just don't utilize the waterways, or the lake, I should say.
But I mean, you'd have to go back to each survey and say, okay, nobody, they didn't check any boxes. Therefore, it's like adding another line at the bottom. Okay, no boxes checked on this one.
This is good. These are good questions, because what I want to do here is, getting this feedback, and then we can go back and take a look at some of these in more depth. And that's exactly what we're trying to find out here or what I'm trying to find out is what issues do we need to do a further analysis of. So this is great. Taking some notes here. This is great for me anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, and there is always going to be that percentage of people who don't use the lake. They either don't live near it, or it doesn't, for people like me, and I only use myself as an example, typically, sometimes my husband, but we live in Wayne County, so we go to the lake very infrequently. When we lived in Monroe County and owned a boat 10 years ago, it was a different scenario. So I'm sure you guys understand.
Great.
So, what we were trying to get to with this question is how important do we think the following functions of the lake are? And again, all 570 people who took the survey did answer this question. So, by and large, the aesthetic experience is more important than not. Same thing with all of these categories, frankly. Recreational opportunities, aquatic wildlife and habitat, nutrient retention and recycling, and then maintaining drinking water. I am going to speed up just a little bit if that's okay with you guys, because I don't want to leave. I have like another 25 slides. So is that okay with you if I just increase?
Please, go for it.
Yep.
And then these are sort of questions that help us rate the degree to which folks believes things are important. And I'll send this presentation to you so you have it to look at, because these are very sort of detail-oriented questions and responses. That larger swath of the darker salmon color, or whatever color it's coming up on in your screen, but the one that goes from most to least is, what people consider the major threat. So we've categorized it in descending order from what they believe that threat to be. So litter and plastic debris and microplastics are the most concerned to folks. Industrial pollution follows second to that. Disposal of household chemicals and auto fluids and things like that. So, and then you go down to agricultural, sewage treatment plants, etc. But you can see that people who took the survey are concerned about, what we might consider the appropriate things, with litter, plastic debris, industrial pollution, etc. So this might not follow along with what's actually the threat, but I think that the top 5 areas here hit the mark, which I think is a good thing. And then we've asked the same type of question for the Genesee River. And in that one, they see industrial pollution as the largest threat. Litter and plastic is the second, disposal of household chemicals, and then agricultural pollution following next for that as well. So in this way, I feel like we do have there is some relevant knowledge out there about the threats to our 2 bigger waterways, which is a good thing. And our messaging can reinforce that as we continue through our marketing year. And then we've also asked to what degree the following are a threat to local streams. And again, not too much variation here with the addition of residential lawn chemicals, which does make sense. So, I mean, I know I've skipped through these quickly, but is there anything surprising to you all that jumped out?
I like the way those charts show it pretty clearly, with stacked on each other like that.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to present the data.
Well, thank you.
I continue to be somewhat surprised that industrial pollution stays that high. Is that a perception, or is there any reason to think that there's reality? Because most of that is point source and most of it should be controlled.
Yeah, Mike, I bring that up to our Industrial Issues Committee, NIWEA Industrial Issues Committee. And basically they're just kind of washing their heads and saying, yeah, that's perception. People aren't going to understand about the speedies permits and point source of discharges, and the fact that we have no industry left in the area, So I jump on that every time, because it's always like that every year, every survey we've done.
It may have a secondary effect of saying, well, the river is polluted by industrial pollution, so I don't have to worry about my car washing.
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is that it's something that industry ought to be concerned about.
No, actually, I'm thinking it's something that we ought to be concerned about because it serves as a blockage for getting
It
people
blocks
to take
from the people
more
knowing what the
personal
real reason is.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Right. It's an education messaging issue,
Yeah.
I guess from my perspective, that's what a lot of this points to is how we use this data to inform people of what's actually taking place versus their perception. And to the extent that we can, the survey, the point of the whole survey, and I will be honest, I joined Causewave in 2020, and this is my first time doing this H2O Hero survey. But, it really, when Andy and I talk about it, it's how do we use this information to help inform the public of what is available on our waterways and what the actual quality is, and and how they can impact it. You know, at the end of the day, that's the goal of this survey. And frankly, the H2O Hero program is helping people know how they can make a difference. So that's my slant on all of this, is how we use the data to message to our population of folks impacting the waterways. Which is actually why I was very excited to come and talk to you all about this, because you know, you're one of the organizations that's helping make a difference in that area. So so thank you again for having me.
I have a question again on that, if you don't mind, Tiffany, and
Yeah.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, on this. In the survey, there's no questions dealing with phosphorus, which is the key element. And why is that?
Well, you know, but we just don't think, we're not at that level, Joe. We're trying to get the person off the street here, you know, to respond to what they think about local water quality. And personally, I mean, I don't think phosphorus is, that they're going to understand that too well. You know, hope maybe things will be changing on that, like the fertilizer law obviously says no phosphorus. So from that point of view, people should be getting more familiar with it. But
There should be some more information, because New York State DEC and EPA think phosphorus is the problem in the Genesee River. And shouldn't we, if we don't ask the question about it, and then we don't know what people understand
No.
about it, then we should at least make more of an effort, as with the terms watershed and stormwater and phosphorus, to educate them more along those lines. At least that's the way I would approach it.
Maybe we should ask the question about algae as opposed to phosphorus.
Well, that's another way of looking at it, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that was my question. Does the average person know what phosphorus is?
Well, they might not, but they should.
But they do know what lawn fertilizer is, and they do know what washing your car is.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be very honest. Oh, sorry, George. I mean, Mike, my apologies.
Yeah, that's all.
I couldn't tell you what phosphorus is without Googling it. But I do, like Mike said, know that the harmful chemicals that are in things like lawn fertilizer and, you know, washing your car are bad.
And that's pretty much how we've treated it, is we've used those generic terms, you know, chemicals, nutrients, that kind of stuff that come from the people that have some control over, with the, like lawn fertilizers and washing cars and that kind of stuff. So no, we haven't gotten to phosphorus. And what you're suggesting, Joe, I think, is that we expand the H2O program to try to include some phosphorus, specifically using phosphorus education.
Yeah, I
Maybe.
think that's reasonable in view of the fact that EPA, DEC, and a lot of other folks are have headed, and not heading, they've been there for years on this. And if folks don't understand it, then it behooves us to educate them a little bit more on it. Because when you start talking about phosphorus and nobody knows about it, then why are people going to support something that in fact does something about it? You know?
Yeah. Here is why you need to control your car washing.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, if I weren't involved in RiverWatch, and I hadn't been party at one time in my life to mining 5 million tons of phosphorus a year,
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't know what phosphorus was either, because I never took a chemistry course.
You know, I think another thing that you might want to include in the future would be septic systems. And that there's quite a few in the county. And, you know, just to raise the awareness that people, you know, where is their waste going? And what is the state of their septic system? Failing septic systems cause a lot of problems.
So let me ask you this, along the lines of questioning with the phosphorus issue, can you tell me what it is, first of all? Because otherwise I probably will Google it. But, you know, how much, as a homeowner, let's say, or somebody who rents, how much exposure that they have to phosphorus? What is it? Is it a household? Is it in our household chemicals? Is it something they have control over?
Well, there's been a ban on phosphorus and detergent in New York State for several years now. And then the attempt has been to try to reduce that. And then I think that's been effective to a certain degree, but also in terms of phosphorus and fertilizers, there's a ban on that now, at least for lawn fertilizers. I don't know what the industrial people, professionals, if they're following that or not. But yeah, there are opportunities, but it also, more importantly, comes from sewage treatment plants and septic systems, as Charlie mentioned. So there are, perhaps one of the reasons why the sewage treatment plants on the Genesee River have not been targeted by and large, even though there's 30 plus of them, is that people don't realize that there's phosphorus coming out of them that's causing some of the issues, not only in the Genesee, but in the Genesee embayment, but also in Lake Ontario. Although there's significant improvement in Lake Ontario proper.
Is phosphorus the biggest threat to the waterways from your point of view?
From EPA and DEC's perspective, it is.
Yeah, so I guess, we're going back to the point that we're trying to target and make the people understand the cause or the things that they're doing that would contribute to that. And I think we mentioned it earlier. It's fertilizing. Mike, I think, said the fertilizing, car washing cars and that. Instead of trying to teach them about phosphorus, we're trying to teach them about the stuff that they're doing that if they change their habits, they'll be able to minimize their impact on the lake. So that's the approach that we've taken to date. So
You might want to include in that, to Joe's point, though, why it is that car washing is an issue.
that's if you go to the website, I think we find more information in the website that will go into more of that detail. Here's what we're doing and here's why it's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, the survey is a gauge of how effective some of that is and where your population you're trying to communicate to is on all these subjects, right? So it's not necessarily an indication of what the problem is. It's an indication of who knows what about the things that you think are important, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just their perception. A
It's
lot
a
of them could be-
perception thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what you're trying to deal with, and that's
Yeah.
makes it harder. Yeah.
And to the sewer treatment plant issue, I don't think the public in general has any input to that.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think they even vote on the taxes that support it. They just show up as a line item in your real estate tax, right?
Yeah, and I think that, when we talk about what the requirements are for the H2O Hero program, they were just reissued this year. And there may be some changes in there about the education that we need to do through this program. I'm not sure if it includes phosphorus or not, because we haven't they weren't official the last time we met, which was the beginning of April. So, it may change this year, but again, the average county resident is who our target population is, which may explain why the focus is in phosphorus, if that's something that's coming from industrial or sewage issues.
Well, it's predominantly a wastewater treatment plant issue and ag. All right, and terms of agriculture, but yeah, it's something to think about, folks. I think I think you're doing a great job here, and I'm just opening up this idea here that perhaps you need to consider some of that, because there's not a connection made between some of these treatment plants, ag, car cleaning, and so forth, and the fact that it's phosphorus is the key element that's involved.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Thank you. I did just see in the chat, Charlie, your question from earlier about where is the survey administered? It's administered online. Okay, so thank you for that, Joseph. I appreciate that. And then also, Moving ahead. So we've asked folks, where does the water that runs downstream in your neighborhood actually go? Where they think it goes. This data into a sewage treatment plant, into the nearest body of water. These numbers have changed over time. Into an underground holding tank, some other place, which is my favorite answer, because it's to me equivalent to the I don't know. But you can see there isn't, outside of into the nearest body of water, these are relatively similar responses year over year. I do like the fact that the don't know has changed dramatically, which I think is a good thing, because it shows us like people don't actually know. So maybe we do have some education to do around where the water goes.
Yeah, my concern on that is that I would have liked to have seen that don't know go down, and so people know where it does go. I mean, you're still looking at 43% of the folks who don't know, 46%
Right.
have no clue.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've been doing this program for, many years now.
Yeah. Which from a marketing standpoint means that not only do we have work to do, but maybe we're not reaching the right people in the right ways to make sure that they do know what's happening to their water.
That affects all of us, actually, no
Yep.
matter what group we're in.
Exactly. So the source of people's tap water, again, there's a large population of folks who don't know, and that is up pretty significantly, I think, from the previous survey. So we obviously still have some work to do in terms of our messaging. We've asked folks if they have a lawn that they're responsible for. This shift from 72% to 65% is, again, I think it's attributed to the fact that we didn't mandate a certain percentage of people taking the survey owning a home. So you can see how that number's varied. And then do you personally, or through a lawn care company, apply fertilizer? 42% are saying that they don't. Which of the following statements best describes how you usually determine the amount of fertilizer following the package instructions? This percentage is down, which is concerning to me, I'm sure to all of us. And so is the amount of folks hiring a lawn service company. So I'm not sure, what this data actually points to, if usage is down as well. But the data certainly is interesting here. Well, and I want to also say, to your point, Joseph, it's interesting because, again, like we're stating it as lawn fertilizer. Is it actually phosphorus? Would that be considered phosphorus?
Yeah.
It has been in the past, and
Yeah.
well, it's nitrogen and phosphorus are the two key elements.
But not if you're applying it yourself these days.
Well,
Right, because it's not able to be sold, right?
yeah, you still can get it if you look hard enough.
Yeah, but most people
Going out, they just get it.
And that would be the people who knew about phosphorus, and we don't think that many know about phosphorus. So
And then we asked, would you be willing to reduce your applications of fertilizer and pesticides to your lawn if you knew it would improve the water quality? The overwhelming majority here said yes, and that's up from 2018, which was a decrease from previous years, but it is still moving in the right direction. How do you usually dispose of paint, pesticides, auto fluid, etc.? So this was a good question for us to see, like the usage of the eco park, which apparently has decreased. Again, I think that the county could use this fact as a way to make sure that they're advertising the eco park. Do people who are renting more know about the eco park and the fact that it's available to them? I'm not sure. Regular garbage and pickup or a landfill, that number is up, which is concerning. At least no one in this survey is burying it. So I guess there's an upside. Storing it in a basement or garage. This is my favorite thing. How many of us have cleaned out a loved one's house and we found all of these chemicals that have been there for who knows how long, right?
Yep.
And then some folks really don't find this question applicable to them. So maybe they're not using household chemicals.
Does that number with the Eco Park is that reflected in their own numbers of usage?
We have not compared that data.
Yeah, the presentations I've heard on Eco Park are like just the opposite of our results. So I don't know how we jive those two, Mike.
Of course, that's the people who know about Eco Park.
Right.
Here, yeah.
I would like to make a comment about this one. I know from my own and my parents' experience, we were heavy users of Eco Park from like legacy chemicals that were stored in the basement and garage, and that now we just don't take in that many chemicals, so we don't have that much to dispose of anymore. So I don't know if some people have kind of gone through that same curve of not acquiring and not having to dispose of as many chemicals.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, from a very broad perspective, when we stop mandating a certain percentage of people owning a home taking the survey, it opens up the door to folks who live with their parents and are taking the survey, or college age students. So they're really not the decision maker necessarily, but we still want to find out what they know or don't know. So there could be a few things attributing to the way that this answer shook out. But yeah, I mean, when you think about the percentage of people doing home improvement projects, in 2020 and 2021, it's skyrocketing. So it's interesting how people's experiences are different with these things.
Well, the other key reason might be COVID.
Yep.
People aren't going out to the Eco Park.
Right, could be.
They are dumping.
Yeah, it could be.
in the garbage.
Right,
Yeah.
during the time that we did this, yeah.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that this is the one survey that I've seen in the last 2 years that hasn't had a significant attribution of information that you could point to COVID and say, this is probably why. This information is fairly consistent, frankly, with previous surveys. And, there really isn't a piece of it, in my mind anyway, that we could say directly relates to the COVID experience, right? I don't know about you all in your day jobs and what you see, but so much, everything else basically that I've seen, there has been at least a data point or two that significantly has been impacted by people's experience with COVID. And this survey is like the little golden nugget that doesn't really have too much of an impact from it. So would you be supportive of a nominal fee to fund water quality improvement projects in our area? I will say, so only 370 people answered this question, but we did change the question around a little bit. Before, there was a dollar amount associated with it. Would you pay, I think it was $5 or something in 2018. This time we changed it to a nominal fee just to be a little more vague and see what people's responses were. It was very clear cut. There was no folks this year answering that they don't know, but the majority said they would, and 34% said they wouldn't. So there you go. We did consistently ask, in the past year, have you been personally affected by, and this is where more of those usage categories come into play, like the beach closings, too much algae in the water, too many weeds, trash or debris, and then fish consumption advisories as well. So things here to consider. This is the percentage of people who have responded yes. We didn't ask this question about trash and other debris in the 2015 and 2012 surveys, which is why there's no data here. But you can see from people who responded yes in most questions, they do feel this year that they've been personally affected by these things. Which I guess in contrast to my immediate previous statement about COVID, you might be able to say that people were using the waterways more because it was safer to be outside, and therefore they were personally affected by these things, but we didn't statistically attribute this data to that specifically. So these are some of our favorite questions, you know, the best definition of a watershed. You can see from the responses, you know, the I don't know is consistent from our past survey. And then folks are a little less inclined to think that it's the area of land surrounding a body of water, a little more inclined to say it's a barrier between water and land.
So another one that's going in the wrong direction for me.
Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of surprising considering that it is like all the time I'm noticing additional signs going up pointing out watershed boundaries.
Yeah.
And
Exactly, Sally.
so I would think
Yep.
it'd be more in the awareness of people, but
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder how much of that sort of thing in general comes to the awareness of adults because it's being taught to children in the schools.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could you repeat that, Mike? You kind of faded away on me.
Well, I know in my experience with my three daughters, they would bring things home from school that they were being taught. You know, recycling, for example, that would become a matter of discussion around the dinner table. That my normal day-to-day job activities, communication with people of my own age would not bring up. So if you teach it in the schools, it will come to the attention of the parents.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that gets back to Genesee RiverWatch ideas in regards to education.
Yep.
And, you know, to bring more of the ecology and environment to students that perhaps is taught in classes now.
Yep.
And that terms like stormwater, watershed, phosphorus, and so forth need to be more carefully explained.
Yeah, and kids become passionate about it, and sometimes their parents have to forbid the topic at the dinner table because they become so passionate about it.
That's cool, actually.
Great. Same kind of question. What's the best definition of a stormwater runoff? You know, again, this is kind of heading in the wrong direction, consistent with the 2015 survey. You know, and then we do always have this population of folks who don't know. Indicative of the fact that we have more work to do, I think. You know, do you currently have a rain barrel in your home? You know, this number has changed a little bit. So we still have work to do with that as well. A rain garden, similar question. More people do have a rain garden, which I think is interesting and encouraging. Can you recall seeing or hearing any public information about the water quality and protection in our region during the last 6 months? 25% said yes, which is up from the previous year. But still lots of folks don't recall having heard or seen anything of it, so. Recognition of the logo, the Larry logo, obviously is strong and growing. So when we think about potentially revamping this, we definitely need to be cognizant of that fact because there is such a strong brand recognition here. And we've asked folks where they've seen it, you know, again, which is always funny with the TV ads, since again, we don't do them, but, you know, water waste signs and disposable bins at local parks on a website. This definitely has picked up. which is a good thing. You know, my child bringing home information from school, not a significant change here. On a billboard, which is also good because we do a significant amount of billboards for a good portion of the year. At the Rochester Museum Science Center, this is a nice uptick for us, and we've actually been working with our MSC consistently, but on their new exhibits that they're planning out right now, you know, we've definitely talked through the representation of Larry and the H2O Hero program there. So that's been a good thing. Social media, this increase is definitely a good thing because we're doing a lot more social media advertising. I'm actually a little surprised personally that that's not a bigger number, but obviously I'm a little closer to this than most folks. You know, people seeing it at the zoo, again, when we talk about making logo changes, we have to think through the various places that Larry is. You know, with physical installations at our MSC and at the Seneca Park Zoo, we definitely want to be cognizant of the fact that we would need to make those changes and the cost of doing that as well. And then signage in villages or towns is up as well, which is interesting. And I think may point to what Sally was saying, with us doing more marking of waterways and rivers and creeks and outlets, that may help. We did survey folks on the water droplet itself, because it is part of the Larry logo, if you'll recall. It's his main sort of insignia on his chest. And, you know, people are seeing it. It varies from where to where. And then 85% of people aren't volunteering to do to help protect our waterway, which is an unfortunate number. We've asked in this survey as well how important each of these sources of plastic pollution are. And it goes down from litter on the beach to people dumping trash in local waterways. Again, this industrial waste and pollution comes up. Litter on the streets and sidewalks, I wish was higher, but I'm glad that it at least is in the top 4 and people understand that it does empty into the lake at some point. You know, wastewater from homes is here as well. Particles from tire wear and breakdown, to be honest, as an average person, I did not know that was an issue. So I'm glad that it's in the survey. I don't know that a lot of folks know it's an issue either, but it's good to know.
Does that wastewater include laundry? My understanding is that washing and drying laundry that is putting a lot of plastic particles out, because most of our clothing includes quite a lot of plastic.
Yeah,
Wastewater from homes. Yeah.
that's how it's accounted for.
Probably don't think of
Yeah.
it that way though. So,
Because microbeads in soap was huge in the news, but I don't think washing your clothes is huge in the news for plastic pollution, or drying your clothes and, like, you know, spewing it out into the air. This probably could use a lot more education, I think, in general.
Yep, I think you're right. So we were encouraged by this, that 86% of folks responding to this would ban plastic products that are identified as harmful, which is amusing to Mike.
yeah, 14% even if they knew it was harmful.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Boggles the mind a bit. But
Yeah. And then how concerned are you about human health impacts of microplastic and microplastic pollution in the lake? You know, obviously these categories are the highest, with very concerned being the highest, which I do find kind of surprising given some of the other data in this survey. There you have it. And then the last question that we're presenting on here is that these actions have been suggested as possible solutions to the problem of plastic pollution. And we've asked folks if they do it already, if they would consider doing it, or if they won't do it. And we've ordered in descending order from what people are most willing to do or do already. So most people from this survey bring their own bags to the stores. I do wonder how that might, I do think that's interesting given the fact that a lot of stores aren't handing out plastic bags anymore, but there you have it. Drinking tap water, using a lint trap on a washing machine or drain hose. So there we've sort of gotten to the laundry issue without specifically educating on it. You know, choosing fruits and vegetables that aren't wrapped in plastic. Don't celebrate with a balloon release, which I don't know about you all, but like when I was a kid, this was a big deal. They talked a lot about how harmful it was. And apparently we've let our foot off the gas because I'm seeing more and more people doing it again and thinking like, did we not learn the lesson of this? But who knows? Maybe this is a theme as I grow into middle age that, you know, I thought things were one way, but it turns out they're not. Using soap bars instead of shower gels, which I think does point to the micro bead question, which have they banned it nationally or is it state by state?
I think it's national.
Okay, great. And then returning non-recycling plastic to the shop you purchased it from, and things go down from there. So that is actually all of the slides I have. Thank you all for allowing me to speed it up a little bit. Are there any questions or general conversational pieces that you would like to bring up or?
Yeah, I do, Tiffany. You several times you said we have more work to do. All right. And I wonder if you could give us your ideas on the kind of work we need to do. Or
yeah, so
perhaps Paul, either one.
Yeah, I mean, Paul, feel free to jump in. What I mean by saying that, and thank you for asking, is that, you know, it shows us where we could do some more education and or marketing. Because like I said in the beginning, the point of the survey is to allow us to understand how effective our marketing and education strategies are, if we're hitting the marks, specifically outlined in the regulations that Andy deals with on a day-to-day basis. You know, and so informing those decisions about where we put our dollars is what we use this survey data for. So when we have more work to do, it could mean changing the messaging to be specific about the actual impacts, the things that are having an impact on our waterways versus what people think they are. And that's just one example.
Thank you.
Sure.
That microbead legislation was passed in 2015 and went into full effect in 2017 at the federal level. I just had to look it up.
I wasn't sure if it was state or federal. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the questions I got was the relationship between the perception and the actual, and trying to take a closer look at that in terms of, you know, if people are perceiving the water quality is getting worse, what does the data say, or vice versa? So maybe some of that might be helpful. It's kind of interesting. Another comment on that.
Yeah.
I think in that connection that I come back to that idea that if you can burst some of the balloons, like there's a lot of industrial pollution, you remove some of the excuses for not taking personal action.
Yeah.
So if you were living next to, say, June Lake at the base of the Tetons, you'd be much less inclined to throw plastic around than, you know, if you were living next to the Cuyahoga River.
I also think locally people's experience obviously differs with the waterway, right? We've done a lot of education, and the RMSC does a stellar job, you know, educating students and working with students on this issue specifically, but are we consistent in the students we're reaching? You know, because we definitely have talked in the last year and a half about the fact that there's less emphasis on how people's habits impact the waterways in the city versus in the suburbs, you know, where you can attribute some water versus if you don't necessarily know there is a river running through the, you know, the city. If it's not in your neighborhood, you know, how are we educating kids on it and their parents as well?
That question, Tiffany, that question you had about whether what's the closest waterway next near your house?
Mhm.
Some other follow-up question that asked them what changes have you seen in your local waterway? Get it away from the lake and the river.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'd like to thank Tiffany and Paul too. Paul got roped into this a little bit too, which is good. I'm glad you both were there. Appreciate your willingness to share this with us because it's, I'm sure you're still poring over it and trying to figure out what to do with it. And you can see the types of questions that people raise when they come up with it. So I think that's great. And thank you again for helping us out. Hopefully
Yeah,
some people.
thank you for having us. Honestly, this is such an important part of doing the survey, is sharing the information and with folks like you who have a reach on the impact of this as well. So,
yeah,
you know, whenever we can collaborate or work together, I
Yep.
think that's always a win-win.
Sure. Yep. That's great.
Let me
Can I
second
make one
that.
more little point? I was, as I was talking to you earlier, I was reading the graphs all backwards. And typically graphs go from, time goes from left to right. You did yours all right to left. And in my brain, I was having to kind of feel like I was looking in the mirror. And I was curious as to why you chose that way and whether it would make more sense to do it like 2012 on the left and 2021, because that's the way I always perceive
Yeah.
things.
I don't think there was a conscious decision to do that. The results came in from our survey folks, and we just went along with that. I don't think there was anything intentional, but I mean, that's a very good point, and we certainly can flip things around.
Yeah.
Especially in the future. There's no problem there.
Yeah.
All right, George, I just also wanted to add on what Tiffany said. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this morning. This is an extremely great group for us to present to because, you know, you guys, especially with the river, and I obviously know you have an awful expertise in the lake too, but they're the ones that we wanted you to be aware of what we were doing. And I wanted all that feedback that you gave us. There was some great feedback here.
Sure.
And we will take all that into consideration and gives me some more direction as to further analysis. So thank you very much.
Yep. You're welcome. We will post the recording on our website sometime probably when all the summits are done, so people can take a look at them afterwards. So that'll come up. Mike had a thing up here about our next summit, just a quick bit of advertising before we go. You got that, Mike?
Yep, I'll bring it back. I was
Coming up next week.
a little
It's
premature in posting it to begin with.
Yeah, that's okay. It's the next one is about a presentation from DEC. They have a interactive map that they have on their website called the Info Locator, and it has environmental quality plus outdoor recreation data. I don't know if you've ever used it before. It's a great tool for all kinds of things that we're showing, in particular the fishing aspect of it. I've used it quite a bit to zero in on, you know, you want to say, I want to go fish the Cohocton River. Well, where can you get in legally into the river? And it helps. It shows you where the parking is, shows you sections of the creek that are accessible and you can fish at, and it's pretty nice. But there's also information about location of wastewater treatment plants, you know, who runs them, and you know, all kinds of different other environmental information. So they're trying to you know, advertise that more, and we're really interested in having an opportunity to share that with folks. So if you don't know much about it, might be something you want to take a look at next week.
Possibly we could get the guy in the picture to look at it. I doubt he's looked at it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And hopefully see you next week.
Thanks, George. Nice.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Tiffany.
Thank you all.
And
Take care.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tiffany.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul.
Mm.